So what do you do when you have an odd-shaped size mold that you've never used before and you need to figure out how much resin it's going to take to fill that thing up? That's going to be today's topic for Resin Casting Quick Tips. Alright guys, so I just made this mold. It's going to be a faux burl. I molded a piece of burl that I want to make resin copies of and then recast in resin. But this is the first time I'm using this and I have absolutely no clue how much resin to mix up for this. I don't know how much it's going to hold. So in the past, a lot of times I'll just kind of mix up more resin than I think I need. The problem with that is you have excess resin that you maybe either pour into like a PVC pipe or some other kind of mold. A lot of times I don't necessarily need extra, little pieces of, castings. So you're kind of wasting resin. I don't necessarily need to have that excess. Or sometimes you undershoot it on accident and then you're kind of stuck with having to mix up more and it's just kind of problematic. The next time, hopefully, you'll get it right. But wouldn't it be better if you could just figure out about how much, pretty close, how much you need the first time? Well, there's a pretty simple way to do this. Grab something like rice, get a bag of rice, fill your mold with the rice, and then dump it back out into a volume cup. That way you know exactly, how many liters or how many ounces the actual mold will hold. Now that's easy calculation if you're using a resin that's a volume mix resin, like Amazing Clear Cast is I think 1-to-1 by volume. So, you just look at your cup and you put half of that as part A, half of it as part B, and you're good to go. Now, in the case of a weight measured resin, like Alumilite Clear Slow Set, the one thing about this, it's pretty simple, but you have to remember to zero out your scale with the cup that you're going to pour it in. Pour, the half of the volume of part A, then weigh that resin. So again, make sure that you've zeroed out your cup so you don't throw off these measurements. But as long as that's zeroed out, you fill it with resin, weigh the resin on your scale, and then in the case of Alumilite Clear Slow Set, it's a 1-to-1 by weight. So just add the same amount of weight of part B, and you're good to go. So it's a pretty simple way to go, and it really gets you really in the ballpark. You might want to kind of, overshoot just a little bit on the first round, just to make sure that you don't undershoot it. But it's a pretty simple way to do it. It's cheap. It works quick. It's not messy, really. Not too messy, usually. And it works great for these kind of odd-shaped molds. Now, if you have just a square mold, you can just use the volume calculators on Alumilite's website, either a square or a cylinder mold. It's pretty simple. You just enter in, what are the dimensions, and then it'll spit out how many, ounces of resin you're going to need. Now, one other little extra tip, bonus tip that I can share is, and I really need to take my own advice with this because I don't usually do this, but make sure once you know how much a mold holds, then write it on the mold, how many grams or, how much volume or whatever it is, whichever way you do it. Write that on the mold so that you're not like, oh, what was this one again? Because sometimes you don't use a mold for 6 months and you're like, I don't remember what it was. And sometimes it's hard to pull out a notebook and figure out exactly the day that you used it last, all that kind of stuff. So just write it on there and you're good to go. So if this is your first time on my channel, we do all kinds of resin casting projects, tips and tricks, and experiments around here. So make sure to subscribe if you want to get notified when new videos get posted. And don't forget to hit the little notification bell. That'll make sure that you get those reminders. And if you're thinking about getting into resin casting, but you're not really sure where to begin, check out my ebook, The Beginner's Guide to Resin Casting. It answers all those beginner questions like, what do I need to get started? What resin should I use? It was intended to kind of help you guys with, those questions that halt the progress of even starting. So it's the basics of resin casting, but it'll give you a lay of the land so you understand like what's going on, and it'll let you get into that first step so you can get started doing some fun resin casting projects of your own. If you're interested in checking that out, it's available on my website. So until next time, guys, thanks for watching this video, and happy casting.